My name is Sophie Seddon and I work for Novus Property Solutions. I am delighted to be hosting this session with you today. First things first, a sincere thank you to our headline sponsor, Gleeds, whose support makes this stage possible, and to Design and Build UK for curating a day of conversations that this industry genuinely needs to be having. Now, this session you're about to hear is rooted in something real. Design and Build UK recently published research looking at leadership in construction and asking a direct question. How inclusive is it really? Not in theory, not in the mission statement, in practice. In the boardroom, in the site office, in the decisions that get made about who gets promoted, who gets heard, and who gets left behind. The findings make for very interesting reading, and today we are going to treat this like a newsroom. We are going to break it down, interrogate it, challenge it, and ask what it actually means for people working in the industry right now. Joining me today are four fabulous people who lead, challenge, and shape inclusion inside some of the most significant organisations in our sector. So I'd really like to welcome our panellists this morning. Gary, can I just start with you, please? Just a little intro, who you are and where you're from.
Thank you. So I'm close enough there. Yes, I'm Gary Jones. I'm a management consultant, but working within the House of the Commons, House of the Parliament at the moment in their Estates Directorate. And the role of my team and everything else is to look at the ethnicity and gender pay gap in our organisation and look at inclusivity within that sector and try to bring a change in that space and actually deliver actionable results. We created a programme, we delivered some great results, won some awards, and that's my contribution for today.
Fab, thanks, Gary. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Heigham. So I am Public Sector Director at Waits. I look after our public sector portfolio nationally. So this year that's to the tune of about £1.2 billion worth of work. I have been at Waits for about 19 years now. Started in the industry completely by accident as an 18-year-old with no idea what to do with my life. And I have a real passion around, I guess, the business benefits of inclusivity, easy for me to say.
Zara?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Zara. I've been in the house building industry for 20 years, mainly on site, in site management roles and senior management positions across various house builders. Very, very kind of key to me is the inclusivity piece, like Karen said.
Helen?
Morning, everybody. My name's Helen Martin. I'm currently the Managing Director for Mighty's Project Professional Services in the UK, which essentially means delivering hundreds of millions of pounds worth of capital programmes on behalf of our clients on a national basis. I've been in and around the construction industry for 30 years. I'm a chartered engineer, and I spend a lot of my time talking about how we make this amazing industry even better for people to come, work and thrive. So I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Thank you all. So you can actually all be part of this conversation today as well. And if I just flick over to the next slide, if you scan the QR code here in your program, I think there's a code in the program as well. You can submit your questions and you can submit them anonymously as well if you would prefer to do so. And then you can watch them come up live on the screen. So, should we get into these headlines then, guys? The say-do gap. We're seeing a really strong perception that leaders talk about inclusion more than they actually act on it. Do you agree with that, or do you think the industry is being judged a bit too harshly? Karen, I'd love to come to you on this one, please.
A nice, easy starter for 10. Objectively, I think my answer has to be yes. You know, I joined the industry 20 years ago. You know, probably the easiest stat to quote is, at that point, we were 12.5% women. We're now 13%. So that needle is not moving, certainly not moving quick enough. So objectively, I think there's something behind that to say yes. There's because we hear a lot, and I think there's a lot of effort that goes into trying to encourage more diversity and inclusion across the industry, but it's not yet translating into kind of facts and figures and data. Having said that, I do think over probably the last 5 years, there's been much more of a step change.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that certainly, particularly around kind of the majority understanding the benefits of being more inclusive, that diversity of thought piece, the fact that having more opinions, more views, better reflecting the society that we serve, translates into better business. I think that's really starting to be more understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary, are you seeing anything from that wider sort of social aspect?
Yes, and just to say that as I'm sort of sitting here, I'm not sort of a consultant or main contractor. I'm sitting on the client side sort of this, and I look at the culture from a sort of a macro and a micro. So within the industry, if we're looking at inclusion, it's obviously challenging, and it has been for a number of years, and we're sort of trying to impact that. From a macro point of view, from a client point of view, it's all about results. It's all about how does it drive benefits for the organizations, how does it create value. And so there are two angles to this. One is that it's the right thing to do, to include everybody, but it also translates to better inclusion, to retention rates, to recruitment, to real P&L, the bottom line on the P&L. So my background is as a business consultant is to look at what does a business need to do to improve and to maximize itself. And in that case, this is equally as important as doing the right thing to do. It's also good business sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's really interesting is if we can have a look at this at the screen here, we've asked the audience the question, rank whose voices are heard most in decision making, and it's very clear to see that they believe it's senior leaders. I think I'd be really interested, Zara and Helen, from your perspective as senior leaders in your organisations, how does that land for you?
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. And as Gary was just saying, those decisions have to be made in line with business goals, business objectives, with the P&L, with that bottom line as well. I think there's a lot of movement that we've had, particularly amongst kind of those decision makers, but there's a lot more to be done. And I think we're all experiencing that in the various kind of subsectors of the construction industry that we're in. And it's really about how we can get that small group of senior leaders to kind of push those initiatives out to make the change and not just talk about them and say this is what we want to do, to actually make an impactful difference.
I think my lens on this is about culture. What we hear, what we experience from senior leaders is what we see, touch and feel about the culture of an organisation. And I think if culturally senior leaders aren't engaging, understanding, actively seeking the views of all of the other groups on that, then they're missing a trick. I mean, the economics are very clear. Organisations who have a diverse workforce make more money. It's absolutely there in black and white. So I don't think senior leaders can afford to ignore this. And if they do, they're being incredibly short-sighted in a world where the workforce is changing rapidly, where the demographics of the workforce are changing rapidly, and the skills that we need to thrive and generate growth are changing rapidly. So I think there's a huge economic case for this, and I'd say anyone who doesn't take it seriously is incredibly naive.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Helen. And I think you mentioned the C word there, which is obviously such a huge topic. And actually, it was identified in the research that the biggest barrier that was identified is the way things are done. It's the culture is the real issue. So do you believe that, or is that just where we place the blame?
Do you want me to have a go at that one?
Go on.
Yes, it's where we place the blame. I think culture is fundamentally deep-seated in many organisations. I mean, I work for an enormous organisation. We employ more than 80,000 people in the UK. If our culture isn't one of inclusion, people feeling like they can come, thrive, be successful, we don't have a business. We employ 1 in 500 people in the workforce in the UK. So we have to get it right. And I think we fall back on excuses. We've never done it this way before one, I'm tired of. Honestly, I've heard it for 30 years. It's absolute nonsense. But I think that's on all of us to challenge that and call it out when we hear it. You know, we've always done it that way. Okay, well, has that always worked for us? What happens if we try something different? So I think there's a collective responsibility to challenge that perception that things can only be done one way.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was just going to add as well, I think that piece around how we're all doing really good things, we need to be sharing more of that, because actually that argument of, we've always done it this way, how do we know that way is going to work? Well, somebody else is probably doing it and making it work for the business, for the individual, for the culture, for everything. So I think there's definitely a collaborative piece that we need to be kind of concentrating on, sharing that best practice, looking at what everyone else is doing and what's a success, so we can replicate that elsewhere in the industry.
I wondered, did you have a point on retention here?
I
Yes.
did. I think culture's super important in this discussion. I think there is very much a reliance on this is how we've always done things. I can understand why, because I speak from a contractor's perspective, we're a low margin, high risk industry. It's really hard. You have to be very brave to do something different, even when the objective facts are there in front of you saying, this will be better. This will be better if I take that risk. It's still very, very difficult to do. And I agree really, really strongly with you, Helen, about it's incumbent upon us to take those risks, to be those brave, courageous leaders who are willing to do something different. And I did have a point about retention. I'm trying to think how I link that
sorry,
into
did
the
I put
culture
you on the
point.
spot? Well,
No, not at all. But,
well,
but there's a real challenge there. I think what you see in organisations, and certainly in the kind of contracting and frontline organisations, is the further through careers people go, the less inclusive the workforce is. So there is definitely a challenge there. It's brilliant. There's loads of great work going on attracting diverse talent pools to the industry. I think we probably need a stronger focus on how we retain that talent and make sure that those career paths are accessible to everyone all the way through to the very top of the organisation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that the work, your point there about the work that we do as a sector in attracting people to this sector is brilliant and shouldn't be stopped. We should continue to attract fabulous people into this industry, especially those younger people. But I do really believe we would not have a skill shortage if we didn't lose as many people from our sector as we are doing so. And I think it's really interesting just looking at the screen here that our audience thinks that we are not inclusive as a construction sector at all. That's how people are feeling today, which really is quite a shame. And I have a question for you, Gary, around who should be accountable? Who, is it everybody, or should we be holding our leaders to account?
I think the answer to that is always yes. I mean, that's the purpose. That's the position. That's the leadership role is not just a title. It's a behaviour. It's a guiding light. It's a north star for the organisation. It should be, at least. I think that then demonstrates the values and behaviours that you wish to portray further within your team. As the saying goes, the fish rots from the head, if that's right. So if you think from that perspective, in terms of a cultural perspective, leaders have a strong role to play in that. But leaders are not only by title and position, they're also by behaviour within the organisation. There are influencers within every organisation who are those informal leaders, those people that are culture warriors, and they create the culture and they create the behaviours and the standards that happen within organisations. And that allows for others who follow those smaller groups to go, oh, this is how we behave, this is what we do, and this is what we don't tolerate, and this is what we do call out, and this is what we do point the finger to. And that sort of sets the value system, the bar a lot higher, and allows people to then, when they do join organisations, to see this is a good, nourishing place to be. It's somewhere where my career can grow and flourish. I can grow and flourish. and the organisation will get the benefit from that because we've got a wholesome community that's working towards a singular goal. I think that's a very key or very important. Hopefully it's answered some of the question though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm interested to know whether you think something around more regulation and really holding organisations to account on this matter is something that should be considered.
I agree with you, Sophie. I think that the only way we're going to see real change is to have some kind of regulation around it. And we've spoken a lot for a few years about positive discrimination and whether or not that's a positive in the workplace, whether or not we should be actively trying to recruit a diverse workforce for that diverse thinking, for that culture piece. As we said, that's clearly economically valuable, but is it the right thing to do? And actually, when we look at changes in the industry over the last 20, 30, 40 years around building regulations or health and safety, they are backed by law, they are backed by regulations. And actually, if we all want to be a more inclusive industry and we want to drive that change, do we need something that holds people more accountable other than individual companies? And I think we do.
We had a really interesting conversation about this on our prep call actually for today, and I'm probably in two minds. So yes, I think we've seen real step change in the industry when we've legislated. Health and safety is a great example of that, where it has enforced a step change, which was in everyone's interests. It was in the interest of better business, of better margins, all of that stuff, and yet it took regulation to really get a coherent response across the industry. And then we moved on to, but could we use competition to achieve the same goal? Because my kind of my lived experience of the industry is we are a very high competition bunch of people. We are all desperate to beat each other, and encouraging that in this respect, I think, could be super powerful as well.
I just wanted to build a bit on that because it's interesting how pay conversations have changed since organisations have had to publish both their gender pay gap and their ethnicity pay gap. So if you measure it, people make it important and start talking about it. If you make it public, you make people embarrassed not to ask or to act. So I think there's a real double-edged sword about unintended consequences and how you use this information and how you measure what good looks like. But you've got to start from something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that's quite interesting that came out of the research was that the inclusion often varies depending on the team or the project. So how do we move away from having these pockets of really great things happening and pockets of real inconsistency where individuals are experiencing really quite poor behaviour in the sector? I think your point there around competition is an interesting one, and I don't believe we're the best sector at collaboration. So we do need to find a solution here. So come on, guys, we've got the best heads in the sector here. What can we come up with?
But I think this is all part of it. This is where it starts. The conversation has to start somewhere, and that collaborative sharing of what we're doing, what's working well, what's not working well, starts with very simple actions. We kind of put a bit of scaremongering against it and go, oh, how are we ever going to do this? But we've got to start small, and like you said, we've got to start somewhere. And actually asking those questions, being curious, challenging the norm is exactly where we start. And there are a lot of good stuff happening, but those pockets of kind of not such good kind of behaviour and culture, we need to be calling those out as well. Yeah. And it starts here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, and I've recently moved into a public sector focused role, and it's quite interesting to see kind of the power that these really big clients with really big pipelines can have in this space as well. I think there's a massive opportunity, and there's as we've seen through Construction Playbook and through the Procurement Act, there's a real focus into social value that's made a tangible difference to how social value is treated by the people delivering the projects. So I think there's an avenue there, probably giving myself an action to take away from this in going and seeing how I can influence in that space, because I think we're going to have to use a variety of approaches to achieve a real step change.
I think just to check, we were talking about inconsistency in experiences, weren't we? Yes, it was just that, from my experience, in terms of attention follows intention.
Yes.
And you have to intentionally look at your policies and your how you behave and how you act as an organisation, and write intentionally the right, correct approach and reinforce that repeatedly throughout the levels of the organisation. It can't be left to pockets. It can't be left to the odd good leader or good manager in various areas. It's about a complete strategy. It's about the ecosystem. And it's about then supporting those who are good ambassadors for your values and highlighting them and giving them airtime, giving them, this is what people follow. This is a people business. As much as we deliver projects and products, it's a people business. And if we affect the values and the behaviours of the people, we improve the values behaviours of the organisation. And that becomes, when you go to the retention and the recruitment, that's your USP. That's what says, oh, that sets you apart. I work, as I say, from a client side. And when we're looking at our social value and everything else, it starts to become, if it does become competition, it becomes who hits the higher metric, who's actually delivering back into their workforce, who's going to do more sustainability. It really is important to my employer, at least.
Yeah, bro. So on the screen behind us, what's really interesting is that our audience here think equally the biggest difference to inclusion would be better training and awareness and strong leadership accountability. I think we've spoken quite a lot around that accountability piece, but I'm interested to know your opinions on actually, do we need some better training, and what awareness can we do really to take this issue forward?
I think it's a really interesting question, actually. How do we train people to be inclusive? So I think there's a real kind of accessibility to some meaningful data, some meaningful stats that demonstrate why this is the right thing to do. And for different people, the why is going to be different. That purpose point, I think, for me is really important. So actually, if we are looking to train people, I guess my thought is, doesn't necessarily need to be around how to be inclusive. It's more a kind of personal focus. Why? What is your why for this being important? Because if we can connect people to their why, that will naturally inspire people to take action and to behave in different ways, and actually empower people to behave in accordance with their own purpose. And I think for me, that's been a real interesting connection point. I did a lot of work around personal purpose about 10 years ago, and that's triggered a whole load of different kind of approaches and thoughts and personal commitments that I've made. 10 years ago, I would never have been sitting on a stage speaking to a lot of people about anything, let alone this subject. So I think yes to training, but maybe the focus of that is around connecting people to their purpose on this. Absolutely.
Well, we're very pleased that you are speaking with us today, because you have an awful lot of very wise words. But I think I just want to move on to that psychological safety piece. So I think it's really important for organisations to create those safe spaces where people can feel heard and listened to, regardless of what the topic is. Because I think when you're talking about inclusion, this is about creating those safe spaces where people can question things without feeling as though they're asking the wrong question or they're going to get beaten up or anything around that. So I'm really interested to know if you've been able to achieve that at all.
I'll start because I've got the mic for no other reason. I think this actually does tie into that training piece as well, and also the culture piece. I think you can't necessarily teach somebody to create a safe environment. It is within them and within their own values and morals that enables that safe space to occur. And we know that training is useful, but sometimes can be a bit of a tick box exercise, some e-learning, etc., that doesn't necessarily provide that safe space. And I think that is happening, but it is still inconsistent. And I think it is down to the individuals. So if we want to increase that availability of those safe spaces, we need to increase individuals' awarenesses of what that means to them, the why should they be doing it, and they've got to be passionate about it. And actually, that's harder than just the tick box training competencies that we need in the industry. But I've seen it recently where we've been able to kind of challenge certain things around paternity leave. Obviously, working in house building, there's a large kind of male workforce. We have a really good paternity policy, but for some individuals to respect that and respond to that is a kind of a turning point. It is a change, and we're really working on kind of those individuals being able to speak up and say, "Well, no, I'm entitled to this," and that's how we're trying to move along.
I think it's multi-layered as well. So there's a perception that psychological safety means speaking up verbally in front of somebody. And I think it's about how organisations collect data. So we do a lot of staff engagement surveys. We have a lot of special interest networks. We have peer-to-peer groups. We have mentoring schemes. You know, what we're trying to get is feedback from our teams in lots of different ways. So for the people who don't feel that they can go and have a direct conversation with a line manager, for example, how can we create other ways in which their voice can be metaphorically heard rather than physically heard? So how do we get a sense of that cultural playback? How do we create anonymization for those who don't feel comfortable speaking up? We have hotlines, we have employee assistance programs. So it's the multi-layered, how do we create insights from all of the things that we hear around our organisation, not just from those who feel comfortable speaking up. And I think it's tapping into that unsaid element that is where we really see the little nuggets that enable us to act. So I think we have to think of this on a series of levels rather than a single one-size-fits-all.
Yes, psychological safety. It's again, I always bring it down back to people. Yes, we can set up the structures, but it's how people treat each other on a day-to-day basis, and how when people who do speak up and respectfully challenge authority or challenge the why of something, it's how they're treated. And if they're marginalised, you'll set the culture. Nobody else will speak up, and you wonder, well, we clearly have no problems because nobody's speaking up. No, you've shown them what happens if you do. And so if you create a space where those voices are amplified and if necessary kept anonymous, but amplified as a movement, and then embraced as a part of, you say, the data, but also, as I've always got this saying about more data doesn't mean better news. It just gives you more and more reasons to go, well, give me more. So sometimes you've got to act and you've got to be shown and be demonstrable about your action. Be really positive on the front. It goes back to that feeling of courage around these areas. And sometimes you do need to break a few eggs to create the omelette. Full of analogies today. Must have missed breakfast. Yeah, so it's and in my organisation we do a lot of you said, we did. So it's that feedback. It's continuously bringing that loop around. It encourages the correct behaviours. It encourages the right feeling. Okay, so and so said something. The organisation heard it. They were acknowledged for it in some way, shape or form, and there's some actual demonstrable action that's taken from it. That encourages people. The opposite does the opposite.
I think just to add a final point to this one, I think, again, where you have that platform, you know, I am very fortunate that I have quite a large platform now, certainly within my organisation. It's absolutely incumbent upon me to be vulnerable, to behave in the way that I want my team to feel safe to behave. So I think there's that, if leadership are showing vulnerability, showing that willingness to ask the difficult question or to challenge the uncomfortable situation, that sets a tone and kind of brings you back to that cultural piece, I guess.
And if I can just add on to this point around how should inappropriate behaviour be handled?
With clarity, directly, at pace, and with a real, without excuse, without the allowance of, you know, good performance, overriding the way we deal with bad behaviour. We need to be really strong, I think, around this.
The reason why I asked that question is because in the research it was shown that how inconsistent poor, inappropriate and bad behaviour is treated in our sector, and I've even seen it within organisations. It can really it's very inconsistent, and something that I've seen on occasion is that it really depends whom has carried out the inappropriate behaviour. It's actually quite pleasing to see on the screen that generally I think people feel quite comfortable. Actually, it's developed a little bit, and I think it depends on the situation, the team, which that inconsistency comes into, which is really interesting, about speaking up and challenging those ideas at work. I just wondered if you did have any advice for our audience or anyone who might be listening around how as a leader, but also as a member of the organisation, how should you be dealing with those inappropriate behaviours if they aren't being dealt with consistently?
Well,
I know, sorry, very big question, and one that I didn't prepare you for either, so putting you on the spot.
I do think you raised really good points there about that kind of performance piece, and actually there should be no excuses. It's not well, you've done that, but it's a black and white situation. And I think following on from what you were saying about the multi-layer, I think that is also appropriate here. And a lot of organisations have an independent kind of person that could step in these circumstances, whether that be someone from HR or an external provider. I think sometimes the direct line management or the people that are involved with the outcomes of that person maybe being disciplined or not being employed can sometimes then have a bit of a bias over their kind of treatment or the outcome. So potentially I would say seek some independent kind of advice or someone else to get an outsider's perspective. I don't think it should be just down to one person when it comes to any kind of disciplinary, but that's where I would start.
I agree with everything that Karen and Zara have said. I think the other thing I would add from a leadership perspective is making behaviours and values and explicit metrics in performance objectives. So lots of businesses focus on the finance, on the numbers, on the performance, and leave on the side the direct expectation of their teams as to what good looks and feels like from a behavioural perspective. You can't be successful and a rounded, in my opinion, leader if you don't demonstrate both of those things. So I think how we as leaders make very clear the expectations of our teams and hold them to account. That's the point. It isn't, if poor behaviour isn't handled at all, we are rewarding a system that is just never going to change. So I think it has to be explicit and it has to be people held to account.
I think there's just, I will pass the mic on to you. I just, just here to dominate the conversation. There is a point for me around lived experience and understanding the lived experience of your workforce. I have definitely seen examples where something has happened that has been inappropriate behaviour to the person involved, but because they have a difference, tick one of the many boxes, that the impact of that experience has not been understood by someone who hasn't walked in those shoes, hasn't lived that scenario. So I agree with everything around how we deal with it, but actually to give the leaders that real kind of appreciation of what lived experience looks like for someone who's not like them, I think would be really helpful in then enabling and encouraging kind of leaders to take more consistent action. Sorry.
I'll keep this brief. I was thinking somewhat, we've spoken a lot about organisational sort of responses, and I'm big on individuals and personal responsibility. In the moment you're in the room and you feel it, and when you feel it, there's an opportunity at that point to be proportionate and to be relatively direct and just to point out that's not how we behave around here. That's not what we do around here. That's culture. Is those small conversations over the coffee table, on site. When you hear it and you feel it, and I say it has a resonance. You know when something's off, and so you just say, no, it's not what we do around here. No more than that. Then there's escalation and opportunities and going through all the right channels. But sometimes, enough times of that, you're creating the culture you seek. You are the culture, and I think that's important that we don't sort of divest it all to the corporate responses. It's the leader's duty. It's outsourcing. I think we should all be involved.
Thank you. Time pressures came up again and again in the research, and I think if we were going to use any reason to divert attention away from inclusion, it's now. Times are particularly challenging and difficult for the sector. But really, is lack of time a genuine barrier, or does it reflect where leaders are choosing to put their attention?
I'll keep this brief. You've answered the question in terms of when time becomes the pressure or becomes very tight, it highlights the priorities. It says what is actually important. It boils things down. It's not, inclusion shouldn't be number 9 and number 10 on the end of your to-do list today. That gets rolled over to tomorrow when something else pops up. It's got to be institutionalized. It's got to be in the DNA of what you do and how you behave and what you do. So it doesn't fall to the side as a separate add-on. It's a part of the environment. It's setting up for success.
Yeah, I agree. I also think time pressure is almost a symptom of the lack of inclusion and diversity that we have. No one's got enough time because we haven't got enough people because we're not an inclusive enough industry. So there's a real link there around that. And I think you're right. I mean, we start every single meeting talking about safety, and we wait till the end of the meeting to talk about the soft stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good point, Gary, and another action for me to take away.
I was just going to add something that, stealing Helen's words from earlier, that it's quite a short-term view if we're using time as an excuse. And if we were to thoroughly assess the benefits of spending the time now on that inclusion and diversity piece, then actually the long-term benefits would outweigh those in the short term, whether that be time, whether that be money, reputation, etc. I think it's not just a short-term fix. And I think if we use it as I've got no time, it is definitely an excuse.
I think it's just lame, quite frankly, if somebody says they haven't got time to behave in an inclusive way. I mean, I don't even know what that's about, if I'm being frank. Can we just call it out for what it is? I mean, honestly, if it's like saying, Karen's point, I haven't got time to keep people safe. I haven't got time to treat every individual like a human being and respect the value they may bring to me and my organisation, or to me as an individual, or for them as a person. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. It's really quite shocking, isn't it, that was one of the pieces of that came out of the research, to say that it was brought up time and time again. It's really quite shocking. So I have one final question for each of you to answer, and then we'll move on to the questions that the audience have asked us. Do you have any hints or tips as a leader that our audience can take away with them and do tomorrow?
Again, I've got the mic, so I'm going to start and possibly reduce the risk of someone else repeating, because we're probably all going to have very similar.
I like your strategy.
Yeah, thanks. For me, it would be something very small. Just put your head above the parapet, speak up, call out anything that you don't agree with personally or from a cultural business point of view, and just really stick by your own kind of values and just speak up.
I was going to say something that's probably inappropriate in a public place. I'm just trying to reframe it. I think for me, it's just remembering the power of authenticity every time you go into a situation, and where you think, and I have just done it actually. I bit my tongue. I didn't say the first thing, probably because it was a bit sweary. Actually, I'll be honest with you. Thought that probably wouldn't land very well. But it's acting in that inner voice. If your inner voice is saying something isn't quite right, be brave enough to voice it, because somebody in the room with you may well be thinking it as well. And just listen to your inner voice. If it doesn't look and feel right, if it doesn't land right, it's probably not right, and call it out.
I think we're probably all going to be on quite a similar theme here. For me, I think trying not to just build on the points that have already been made. I've probably got two things. One, find your why. Connect with your why, because that will just naturally empower you to act in a completely different way and with far more courage than you would have done beforehand. And the second one is probably building on your point, Helen. Data. Let's start measuring ourselves. Set yourself some KPIs and hold yourself to account.
It's got to me quickly. I still haven't thought of anything. A lot of great points and very valid. I think it's about what you can walk away with today and action tomorrow possibly, is to lift our heads from our tasks of the day and just do a little bit of 360. Just look around us, look to our left, look to our right. Things that we say we don't have the time for, or we're far too busy, or we're far too focused on our really specialist, whatever it is recognizing that without all of us, there is none of us. We are all part of the same team. We're all part of the same group. We're all trying to deliver for the business, against the project, the objectives. We are a team. And if you don't look and help your fellow team member in ways that they will require it and support one another, and actually it doesn't help the project, it doesn't help the business, it doesn't help you as an individual to grow. And so I think for me, it'd be more of that community, more of that collaboration across ourselves. Vulnerability was mentioned earlier, and that's always a challenge in terms of individuals in any situation, especially we understand our environment. But I think I always bring it back to self. I know I'm not apologizing, but I am apologizing. I always bring back to self, what do I feel that I need to just lift myself up and look to my left and look to my right, and what have I not noticed? What have I been blind to? And take the shades off and maybe sort of do that. That's one thing I can do tomorrow.
Yeah, great point, Gary. Thank you. So we have a question here that's been brought to us, which is there a more widespread method to get construction further up the agenda in career conversations in schools?
I'm going to start and be quick. Yes. Is there a more widespread measure, did I hear there?
Method.
Method, I beg your pardon. I do believe in outreach. I'm very big in terms of me as my organisation, as I say, client side, but we have an estates directorate and we go across facilities as well, is to go out and to actually identify roles within my organisation, which is UK Parliament, that there are roles and jobs for you like this here. And to go out to the individual communities and the social side of things and to invite people in. And I think that's really important for my organisation, both from the macro and a micro level, to invite people in and to take part, to see people like you here, that you can have a career, going back to full circle from my earlier answer, a career here, opportunities are available here. So outreach is my biggest thing, and getting into the communities to do so.
I think we've tried an awful lot. We talk a lot about STEM, we talk a lot about social value, we talk a lot about the kind of outreach that Gary's spoken of. And I did a Women in Engineering neighbourhood engineer thing for a period of time when I first graduated. But I don't think government are taking this seriously, because it always feels like this is a grassroots initiative. It's always people who are really passionate about the environment they work in, wanting to bring it alive for people and making it their personal commitment to go to a school, to go and talk to a group. And I just think we need to get government to get their act together about some of this noise. Because the changes that have been made to visas, the changes that have been made to skilled careers, the changes that are being made to who can access jobs in our environment are putting more and more barriers up. It's becoming hard work just to get the job. And I think we need to think more radically. We talked about what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. Well, let's start measuring construction in schools. Let's start putting it on curriculum. Let's start making people have these conversations, because we won't get there with the goodwill of individuals doing brilliant stuff at a really inspirational level. This needs to be a bigger conversation.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. So this is the conversation in this industry, and we need to keep having it. not just on stages like this, but in boardrooms and within teams and in rooms where decisions are made. I'd really just like to take a minute to thank our wonderful panelists today. You've been absolutely fantastic, and some really, really important points were raised this morning. A huge thank you to Gleeds for sponsoring this stage, and to Design and Build UK for a brilliantly curated day. We will see you back here shortly. Thank you so much.